The words sliced through the air in perfect German, each syllable dripping with contempt as the restaurant fell silent. No one noticed the little girl's eyes widen with recognition, or how her small hands trembled as she replied in flawless German, uttering the one word that would shatter his world: "Father." We'd love to know. Where are you watching from today? Drop a comment below and don't forget to like and subscribe for more emotional stories that will leave you speechless. The crystal chandeliers of Maximilian's sparkled above Manhattan's elite as Alexander Wagner surveyed his empire. At 52, he'd built the most exclusive restaurant chain in America, with wait lists months long and celebrities begging for tables. Tonight was special, the grand reopening of his flagship New York location after a $30 million renovation. "Herr Wagner, the governor just arrived," whispered Thomas, his assistant of 15 years. Alexander straightened his custom Armani suit and nodded. Everything was perfect. The champagne flowed, the Michelin-starred chefs executed flawlessly, and New York's wealthiest showered him with praise. This was the culmination of 30 years of ruthless business acumen since he'd left Munich with nothing but ambition. "Mr. Wagner, forgive the interruption." The maitre d' appeared, visibly uncomfortable. "There's a situation at the service entrance." Alexander's smile vanished. "Handle it." "Sir, it's a child. Security tried to remove her, but she's causing a scene. Says she won't leave until she speaks with you, specifically." "For God's sake, Gerald. Must I solve every problem?" Alexander stormed toward the kitchen, fury building with each step. The restaurant's back alley was illuminated by a single light, revealing a small girl in a tattered coat, clutching a worn teddy bear. "This is what interrupts my evening?" Alexander switched to German, his native tongue reserved for moments of pure rage. "Du dreckiges, kleines Nichts, verschwinde von meinem Restaurant." "You filthy little nothing, get away from my restaurant." The kitchen staff froze. They'd seen his temper, but never this vicious, especially toward a child. The girl, no more than 7, looked up with startling blue eyes. Her blonde hair was matted and dirty, but there was something in her gaze, something disturbingly familiar. "Ich suche meinen Vater," she replied in perfect German. "I'm looking for my father." Alexander's blood turned to ice. "Where bist du?" he demanded. "Who are you?" "Emma." "Emma Schmidt." Her small voice echoed in the alley. "My mother was Katharina Schmidt." The name struck Alexander like a physical blow. Katharina, the waitress from his first American restaurant. The woman he'd spent one passionate winter with 7 years ago before discarding her when she became inconvenient. "She died last month," the girl continued, her German impeccable with a slight Bavarian accent, just like his own. "Before she died, she gave me this." She pulled out a faded photograph showing a younger Alexander with his arm around a beautiful blonde woman. "She said to find you. She said you're my father." Alexander staggered backward as every eye turned to him. The resemblance was undeniable. The same ice-blue eyes, the proud jawline, even the way she tilted her head defiantly. This child was unmistakably his. His empire suddenly felt hollow as a single truth crashed through his perfectly constructed world. The homeless child he'd just publicly humiliated was his daughter. The limousine crawled through Manhattan's traffic as Emma sat rigid on the leather seat, her teddy bear clutched to her chest. Alexander stared at his phone, making frantic calls to his lawyer while stealing glances at the girl. DNA tests were already arranged for morning, though he needed none. Her eyes, Katharina's eyes, watched him with unsettling intensity. "Where have you been staying?" he finally asked in English. "Different places." Her English carried a slight German accent. "Miss Abigail at the shelter helped after Mama died, but the shelter closed 3 days ago." Alexander's jaw tightened. "And your mother never contacted me?" "She tried, many times." Emma's voice was eerily adult. "She kept all the letters marked 'Return to Sender.' No, she said you were too important for us. The accusation hung between them as the car stopped at his Central Park penthouse. The doorman's eyes widened at the sight of the disheveled child accompanying the notorious bachelor billionaire. "Mr. Wagner, good evening," he stammered. "James, this is Emma. She'll be staying with me." "Arrange for the guest room." Alexander strode to the private elevator, Emma following silently. Inside his 10,000-square-foot penthouse, Emma stood motionless, taking in the cold, modernist decor, all steel, glass, and abstract art worth millions. "Are you hungry?" Alexander asked awkwardly. Emma nodded, still clutching her bear. He led her to the kitchen bigger than most apartments. "Mrs. Reynolds comes tomorrow. She's my housekeeper." He opened the refrigerator, realizing it contained only champagne and takeout containers. "I can make my own food," Emma offered. "I did for Mama when she was sick." The statement hit Alexander like a slap. What happened to her? Cancer. Emma's composure cracked slightly. "She got too sick to work. Then we lost our apartment." Alexander swallowed hard. While he'd been amassing billions, Katerina had been dying in poverty with his child. His phone buzzed. The governor wondering where he'd disappeared to, he silenced it. "Tomorrow we'll get you things, clothes, whatever children need." He ran his hand through his perfectly coiffed hair. "There's a bathroom through there. You should clean up." Emma disappeared into the guest bathroom. Alexander poured himself a scotch, hands trembling. 7 years ago, Katerina had told him she was pregnant. He'd accused her of trying to trap him, fired her, and sent his lawyers with a pathetic settlement and ironclad NDA. He'd never even wondered about the child. The sound of running water stopped. Emma emerged with a clean face, her blonde hair dripping onto her filthy dress. "I don't have other clothes," she said simply. Alexander disappeared into his room, returning with a silk dress shirt. "Use this for tonight." She took it wordlessly and returned to the bathroom. Alexander made another call. "Sarah, cancel everything for the next week." "Everything?" His publicist began to protest. "No, you don't understand. I have a daughter." Emma reappeared, swimming in his shirt, looking impossibly small and vulnerable. "Why did my mother name me Emma?" she asked suddenly. Alexander froze. "It was my grandmother's name. She said you'd remember. She said it was the only conversation where you seemed human." That night, as Emma slept in the guest room, Alexander sat in darkness, staring at the photograph she'd brought. How many lives had he ruined in his relentless climb to the top? And how could he possibly fix this one? Morning sunlight sliced through the penthouse windows as Alexander paced, phone pressed to his ear. "I don't care what it takes, Rebecca. I need custody papers drawn up immediately." His lawyer's voice crackled through the speaker. "Alexander, we need to establish paternity first. If the mother had no will naming you, she's mine." He glanced toward the guest room where Emma still slept. "Just handle it." He ended the call as Mrs. Reynolds, his housekeeper of 12 years, emerged from the elevator, stopping short at his appearance. Unshaven, still in yesterday's rumpled shirt. "Mr. Wagner, are you ill?" "There's a child here," he blurted. "My daughter." To her credit, Mrs. Reynolds merely blinked. In 12 years, she'd never seen a woman stay overnight, let alone heard mention of a child. "She has nothing, no clothes, no toys, nothing." Mrs. Reynolds nodded efficiently. "I'll arrange everything, sir." "And breakfast. Children need breakfast, right?" A small voice interrupted them. "I like eggs." They turned to find Emma in the doorway, still swallowed by his shirt, blonde hair tangled around her face. "Good morning," Mrs. Reynolds said warmly. "I'm Dorothy. You must be hungry." Emma nodded, approaching cautiously. "Mrs. Reynolds will help you today," Alexander said awkwardly. "I have meetings." "You're leaving?" Emma's voice remained neutral, but her eyes betrayed a flash of hurt. Alexander hadn't considered any alternative. His calendar was packed with investors and business partners. But looking at Emma's resigned expression, he recognized it. The same look he'd given his own father each time he broke another promise. "The meetings can wait," he heard himself say. His assistant would have a meltdown, but suddenly that seemed irrelevant. While Emma ate, Alexander retreated to his office, surrounded by awards and financial magazines featuring his face. His phone buzzed incessantly. The restaurant incident had somehow leaked. Already, social media speculated about the mysterious child. The DNA testing technician arrived, performed the cheek swabs, and departed with promises of expedited results. Though unnecessary, Alexander needed official documentation. "Sir," Mrs. Reynolds appeared, "the child needs proper clothing and other essentials." Alexander grabbed his wallet. "Buy whatever she needs. Perhaps," Mrs. Reynolds suggested gently, "Emma would prefer if you accompanied her." He started to refuse, then saw Emma watching from the doorway, a ghost of hope in her expression. An hour later, Alexander Wagner sat uncomfortably in a children's boutique on Madison Avenue, watching Emma try on clothes while whispers surrounded them. The salespeople fawned over him while sneaking curious glances at the girl. "Is this okay?" Emma emerged in a simple blue dress. "If you like it," Alexander replied, completely out of his element. "Mama said we shouldn't waste money." The comment stung. His daughter worried about wasting money while he spent thousands on wine without thought. "Emma," he said quietly, "you can have whatever you want." She studied him, those piercing blue eyes seeming to look straight through his defenses. "Why didn't you want us?" The boutique went silent. Alexander felt heat rising in his face. "It's complicated," he managed. "Mama said you were too important for a family. That important men don't have time for little girls." Each word felt like an indictment. He'd spent his life acquiring wealth and power, stepping on anyone in his way, including a pregnant waitress who'd wanted nothing but acknowledgement. "Your mother was right about many things," Alexander said carefully, "but she was wrong about that." Emma nodded, clearly unconvinced. "Can I have books too?" "Mama used to read to me every night." As they left the store with more packages than they could carry, Alexander realized with startling clarity that all his business acumen had left him completely unprepared for this 7-year-old girl and the long-buried emotions she unearthed. The paternity test results arrived via courier 3 days later, confirming what Alexander already knew. Emma was unquestionably his daughter. His legal team had moved with unprecedented speed, filing for emergency custody given Emma's homeless status. "You'll need to appear before the judge next Monday," Rebecca explained over the phone. "Given your history and public profile, expect scrutiny." Alexander hung up and found Emma sitting cross-legged on his Italian marble floor, reading one of the dozens of books they'd purchased. She'd been quiet but observant, watching his every move like a scientist studying an unpredictable specimen. "Emma," he began awkwardly, "we need to discuss your future." She marked her page carefully. "Are you sending me away?" "No," he said quickly. "I'm applying for custody. That means you would live here, with me." Emma's expression remained guarded. "Permanently?" The question gave him pause. Children were permanent, weren't they? The thought terrified him. "Yes." "Why?" Her directness was unnerving. Alexander considered his motivations, public relations, legal obligation, or something deeper he wasn't ready to examine. "Because I'm your father," he finally answered. "You didn't want to be before." Her honesty was devastating. "I made a mistake," he admitted, perhaps the first time he'd spoken those words aloud. Emma considered this. "Mama said mistakes can be fixed if you really mean it. Your mother was a wise woman." The moment was interrupted by his phone. Another crisis at the restaurant, another meeting he couldn't miss. The familiar pull of his empire, demanding attention. "I need to go out," he said reluctantly. Emma nodded, returning to her book. "I understand." But did she? Did she understand he'd built his life around never being accountable to anyone? That for 30 years nothing had mattered except the next acquisition, the next victory. "Mrs. Reynolds will stay with you," he added, grabbing his jacket. "Mr. Wagner," Mrs. Reynolds intercepted him at the elevator. "Emma mentioned she's never been to Central Park." "And?" he prompted, checking his watch. "It's right across the street, sir." Her tone carried gentle reproof. "Perhaps your meeting could wait an hour." The old Alexander would have dismissed the suggestion immediately. Business always came first, but Emma's words echoed in his mind. Important men don't have time for little girls. 30 minutes later, Alexander Wagner walked awkwardly beside his daughter through Central Park, drawing double takes from joggers who recognized the infamous businessman holding a child's sticky ice cream cone, while his own melted forgotten in his other hand. "Did you know there are 26 playgrounds in Central Park?" Emma reported, her reserved demeanor briefly yielding to childish excitement. "And a castle." Alexander checked his buzzing phone. His executive team was in meltdown over his absence. "Can we see the boats?" Emma pointed to conservatory water, where children sailed miniature vessels. "I really should get to my meeting," he began, then stopped at her expression, that immediate acceptance of disappointment, as though she'd expected nothing else. It was the same expression he'd worn at 7, waiting for his father, who prioritized his surgical career over school events and birthdays. "The boats can be arranged," he found himself saying, putting his phone away. As Emma raced ahead, Alexander felt something unfamiliar, a tightness in his chest that wasn't anxiety about work or markets, but something dangerously close to caring about someone other than himself. That evening, as he finally checked his messages after tucking Emma into bed, another foreign experience, he found one from Thomas, marked urgent. The restaurant reviewer from the New York Times had been present during his confrontation with Emma. The article was running tomorrow: "Billionaire Restaurateur's Secret Child, a story of abandonment and privilege." Alexander sat heavily in his leather chair. His carefully constructed public image would be shattered overnight. Investors would panic. The board would question his judgment. Yet somehow, looking toward the room where Emma slept, none of that seemed to matter quite as much as it had a week ago. The New York Times article hit like a hurricane. By noon, every major news outlet had picked up the story. Restaurant mogul's homeless daughter, America's most shocking family reunion. Security had to clear photographers from the lobby of Alexander's building, while his PR team struggled to control the narrative. "We need a statement," Sarah insisted, pacing his living room. "The board is in panic mode. 2 investors have already called demanding explanations." Alexander watched Emma on the terrace, where Mrs. Reynolds was helping her plant flowers in pots, a small attempt to bring warmth to the sterile penthouse. "Let them panic," he replied, surprising himself. Sarah stared at him. "Alexander, this is serious. Your reputation—" "My reputation," he interrupted, "is as a ruthless businessman who discards people when they become inconvenient." "Isn't that accurate?" She fell silent, having witnessed that ruthlessness firsthand over the years. "Draft something simple," he continued. "Confirm Emma is my daughter. Say I'm overjoyed to have her in my life. Nothing more." "And the mother?" "They're painting you as a man who abandoned his pregnant girlfriend and left her to die in poverty while he built restaurants charging $500 per meal." He laughed bitterly. "That's precisely what I did." His phone rang, the board chairman demanding an emergency meeting. Alexander declined, another unprecedented action that left his team speechless. Outside, Emma carefully patted soil around a small flowering plant. For 7 years, he'd missed everything: her first words, first steps, first day of school. What kind of man discovered he had a child and felt nothing but irritation at the inconvenience? His own father came to mind, Dr. Heinrich Wagner, brilliant neurosurgeon, terrible parent. The man who'd responded to Alexander's childhood achievements with criticism and absences. The man he'd spent his life simultaneously resenting and becoming. "Alexander?" Sarah's voice softened. "What's really going on? I've known you 15 years, and I've never seen you like this." He couldn't explain the transformation happening inside him, how looking at Emma awakened long-buried parts of himself, how her straightforward questions forced him to confront the hollowness of his existence. "I need to be at the custody hearing on Monday," he said instead. "Clear my schedule." The weekend passed in a strange bubble, isolated from the media frenzy. Alexander cancelled his usual social engagements, instead spending awkward hours with Emma, learning his daughter had inherited not just his looks, but his intellect. She devoured books beyond her age level, spoke 2 languages fluently, and approached problems with analytical precision. "Mama taught me German, so I would know my heritage," she explained as they ate dinner Sunday night. "She said it was important I understand where I came from." Alexander felt a stab of shame. Katerina had honored his culture while he had discarded both of them. "Were you and Mama friends?" Emma asked suddenly. Alexander considered lying, then remembered how lies had shaped his own childhood. "Not exactly. We knew each other for a short time." "But you liked her." "Your mother was." He searched for words. "She was kind and beautiful. Very intelligent. She got sick last year," Emma said matter-of-factly. "She couldn't work anymore. That's when we moved to the small room." Alexander pictured Katerina, once vibrant and proud, wasting away while struggling to care for their daughter, all while he acquired another restaurant, another vacation property. "Did she suffer?" he asked quietly. Emma looked down. "Sometimes she cried at night when she thought I was sleeping. She worried about what would happen to me." The custody hearing loomed tomorrow. His lawyers assured him it was a formality. What judge would deny a billionaire custody of his own child? But sitting across from Emma, Alexander confronted a disturbing truth. He wasn't sure he deserved her. That night, unable to sleep, he found himself outside Emma's door, listening to her steady breathing. The child had lost everything: her mother, her home, her security. And now her future rested in the hands of a man who had spent his entire life caring about nothing except wealth and power. For the first time in decades, Alexander Wagner prayed, not for success or advantage, but for wisdom to avoid destroying the one pure thing that had entered his life. The family court was nothing like the corporate boardrooms where Alexander usually exercised his power. Here, his tailored suit and commanding presence meant nothing to Judge Eleanor Martinez, a veteran of the system who'd seen every type of parent imaginable. "Mr. Wagner," she peered over her glasses, "while the DNA test confirms paternity, I have serious concerns about your suitability as a guardian." Alexander's lawyer began to object, but he silenced her with a gesture. "Your Honor, I understand your concerns." "Do you?" The judge leaned forward. "Until last week, you had no relationship with this child. Your ex-girlfriend raised Emma alone while fighting terminal cancer. According to these records, Ms. Schmidt attempted to contact you multiple times regarding your daughter." Alexander felt Emma beside him, listening intently. He'd arranged for her to sit with them rather than waiting outside, another decision his lawyers had protested. "That's correct," he admitted. "I refused all contact." His legal team tensed at this deviation from their carefully prepared statement about miscommunications. Judge Martinez continued, "Child Services has investigated Ms. Schmidt's final living situation. While she provided excellent care given her circumstances, the report indicates they were living in an unheated room after eviction from their apartment. During this time, your net worth increased by approximately $3 billion. Each word felt like a physical blow. Alexander fought the urge to defend himself with the usual excuses he hadn't known. He'd been busy building his empire, but they sounded hollow, even in his own mind. "Your Honor," he began, "I can't change the past. I failed Katerina and Emma in ways that are unforgivable." He felt Emma's eyes on him. "I have extensive resources and can provide every material advantage. Children need more than material advantages, Mr. Wagner." "I know." He took a breath. 7 days ago, I was a different man. I cared about nothing except my business. Then Emma arrived, and He struggled to articulate the transformation. "She reminds me of who I used to be before I became obsessed with success. She deserves better than me, but I'm asking for the chance to become the father she deserves." Judge Martinez studied him. "Emma, would you approach the bench, please?" Emma walked forward, tiny in the vast courtroom. "I'm going to ask you some questions privately," the judge explained, switching off the microphone. For 10 excruciating minutes, Alexander watched his daughter speaking earnestly with the judge, occasionally glancing in his direction. What was she saying? Did she want to stay with him, or would she prefer a foster family, people with actual parenting experience? Finally, Emma returned to her seat. "Mr. Wagner," Judge Martinez resumed, "I'm granting temporary custody for 90 days, with weekly check-ins from Child Services. Permanent custody will depend on their reports." Alexander exhaled slowly. "Thank you, Your Honor." "Don't thank me yet," she warned. "I've seen wealthy parents outsource childcare entirely. If you're not personally involved in Emma's daily life, I will revoke custody immediately." Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, shouting questions. Alexander's security team created a protective barrier around Emma as they pushed toward the waiting car. "Mr. Wagner, did you know about your daughter all along? Is this a publicity stunt to humanize your image? Did you pay off the mother to keep quiet?" Alexander helped Emma into the car, then turned to face the press, something his team had explicitly warned against. "Emma is my daughter," he stated firmly. "Her mother, Katerina Schmidt, was an extraordinary woman who raised an incredible child without any help from me. That is my failure, not hers. We ask for privacy as we get to know each other." As they drove away, Emma broke her silence. "You didn't have to say nice things about Mama." "I said the truth," Alexander replied. "Your mother accomplished something remarkable in you." Emma studied him with those penetrating eyes. "The judge asked if I wanted to stay with you." Alexander tensed. "What did you tell her?" "I said I wasn't sure yet." Her honesty was refreshing and terrifying. "But I told her you took me to see the boats when you had an important meeting. Mama said you could tell what people really care about by what they're willing to be late for." As they reached the penthouse, Alexander's phone buzzed with news he would have considered catastrophic a week earlier. His company's stock had dropped 15% following the custody hearing. For the first time in his adult life, Alexander Wagner deleted the notification without reading it. Some things, he was beginning to understand, mattered more than money. 1 month after the custody hearing, Alexander sat in an unfamiliar place, the principal's office at Westbrook Academy, Manhattan's most prestigious elementary school. Across from him, Principal Richardson cleared her throat uncomfortably. "Mr. Wagner, while Emma's academic assessment shows extraordinary potential, our mid-year admissions are typically—" "I understand," Alexander interrupted, having anticipated the objection. "Perhaps I wasn't clear. I'm not asking for special treatment." His tone suggested otherwise. The Wagner Education Foundation's annual donation could certainly be directed elsewhere. Principal Richardson's expression tightened. "Mr. Wagner, we cannot be pressured. Let me put it differently." Alexander leaned forward. "Emma lost everything, her mother, her home, her stability. Education was Katerina's priority. Emma continued reading and learning, even while homeless. She deserves this opportunity." The mention of Emma's circumstances shifted something in the principal's expression. "Her test scores are admittedly exceptional," she conceded. "We could arrange a classroom visit tomorrow." Alexander checked his watch. He had a board meeting in 30 minutes where executives were demanding explanations for his increasingly frequent absences. "I'll bring her at 9. Outside, Emma waited on a bench, engrossed in a book about marine biology. At 7, she read at a high school level, another discovery that filled Alexander with conflicting pride and shame. What else had he missed? "Ready?" he asked, offering his hand. Emma marked her page carefully. "Did they say yes? We're visiting tomorrow. They'll make their decision after." She nodded, accepting this contingency like she'd accepted every uncertainty in her young life. "What if they don't want me?" "Then we'll find somewhere better," Alexander assured her, surprising himself with his conviction. The old Alexander would have bulldozed any resistance, demanding his way through sheer force of will and money. But Emma deserved better than an education secured through intimidation. His phone vibrated. Thomas was calling for the 5th time. The board was waiting. "I have a meeting," he explained, bracing for Emma's now familiar look of resignation. Instead, she nodded with understanding that seemed far beyond her years. "You should go," she said. "Mrs. Reynolds said we're having spaghetti tonight. It's my favorite." Alexander experienced a moment of clarity. 30 executives could wait in a boardroom for hours, but Emma's trust, still fragile after years of abandonment, couldn't. "They can start without me," he decided, putting his phone away. "How about ice cream before we head home?" Emma's surprise quickly transformed into a cautious smile, one that Alexander had begun cataloguing, cherishing each appearance. Unguarded joy was still rare, each smile a hard-won victory in their evolving relationship. Later, as Alexander finally joined his board meeting 2 hours late, he weathered their thinly veiled annoyance with newfound perspective. His COO outlined the PR strategy to rehabilitate his image after the unfortunate family situation. "We'll emphasize your commitment to education," the man explained. "Position you as a devoted father who's balancing work and family." "No." Alexander's response silenced the room. "There will be no PR campaign using my daughter." "Alexander," his CFO interjected, "our stock is down 22%. Investors are questioning your focus." "Let them question." Alexander straightened. "For 7 years, I missed my daughter's entire life while accumulating wealth that meant nothing to her or her mother. If stock prices are your primary concern, perhaps you should reconsider your priorities." The boardroom fell silent. No one had ever heard Alexander Wagner speak this way. For decades, profit had been his only language. That night, as he read Emma's nightly story, a ritual suggested by Mrs. Reynolds and now sacred to both of them, Alexander received a text from his lawyer. The social worker's first report had been filed with the court, noting marked improvement in parental engagement, but concerns about delegated childcare responsibilities. Alexander looked down at Emma, already drifting to sleep against his shoulder, and made a decision that would have been unthinkable 6 weeks earlier. His business had survived 30 years of economic upheaval, market crashes, and fierce competition. It could survive without his constant presence while he focused on the one thing money couldn't buy: Emma's trust. "I don't understand. You're doing what?" Thomas stared at Alexander as if he'd proposed selling the entire restaurant chain for $1. "Taking a leave of absence. 4 months. Alexander continued sorting documents on his desk, separating what required his personal attention from what could be delegated. Thomas sputtered. "But the Chicago expansion, the Tokyo negotiations, the television deal. All proceed as planned under your supervision." Alexander handed him a folder. "I've prepared detailed transition guidelines. The executive team has specific responsibilities you'll coordinate." "Alexander," Thomas lowered his voice, Is this about the custody review? Because our legal team says this isn't about legal requirements. Alexander's tone ended further discussion. It's about choices. For the first time in my life, I'm choosing something more important than Wagner Enterprises. The news of Alexander Wagner's temporary step back from his empire sent shockwaves through the business world. The Wall Street Journal ran a front-page analysis questioning his judgment. CNBC debated whether the Wagner dynasty was crumbling. Former associates whispered about mental breakdowns and midlife crises. Alexander ignored it all, instead focusing on transforming a section of his penthouse into a proper bedroom for Emma. They selected paint colors together, sky blue, furniture, practical but pretty, and decorations, ocean-themed, reflecting her newfound passion for marine biology. "You're actually good at this," Emma observed, as they arranged bookshelves one Saturday afternoon. "At what?" Alexander asked, struggling with a particularly stubborn shelf. "Being a father." She handed him a screwdriver. "You're trying harder than Tommy's dad. He never shows up for anything." Alexander paused, strangely touched by this matter-of-fact assessment from his brutally honest daughter. "Who's Tommy?" "My friend from school." Emma had been attending Westbrook Academy for 3 weeks, initially quiet and reserved, but gradually forming connections. "His dad owns a bank or something. He's never at school events." The irony wasn't lost on Alexander that a month ago he would have been that absent father. Now he attended every school function, helped with homework, and knew Emma's teacher by name. Their routine developed organically, breakfast together before school, dinner together every night, and weekend outings to museums, parks, or simply exploring the city that had been Emma's home, yet remained largely unfamiliar to her. Today, they had plans to visit the American Museum of Natural History, specifically the ocean exhibit Emma had been reading about. "Ready for adventure?" he asked, setting down his tools. Emma nodded enthusiastically, another sign of her slowly blossoming comfort in their relationship. At the museum, Alexander found himself enchanted not by the exhibits, but by Emma's reaction to them. Her wide-eyed wonder at the massive blue whale model, her detailed questions that stumped tour guides, her careful notes in a journal Mrs. Reynolds had given her. "Did you know," Emma informed him solemnly, "that the colossal squid has the largest eyes of any animal, almost 11 inches across?" "I did not know that," Alexander admitted, realizing how little he knew about anything beyond business acquisitions and profit margins. As they explored, Alexander noticed a man watching them intently, occasionally taking notes. Years of corporate espionage had honed his awareness of surveillance. "Emma, stay close," he murmured, positioning himself between her and the stranger. The man approached anyway. "Mr. Wagner, Connor Jenkins, New York Family Magazine. Could I ask about your dramatic lifestyle change? Our readers are fascinated by your transformation from ruthless businessman to devoted dad." Alexander felt a familiar anger rising. "No comment. Is it true you've stepped away from your company for her?" Jenkins persisted. "Our sources say you've cancelled international meetings to attend school functions. Quite the change from the man known as the Terminator in business circles." Emma looked up at Alexander with confusion. "What's a Terminator?" "Nothing," he replied quickly, then to the reporter. "We're having a private family day. Please respect that." "Sorry, just one quote," Jenkins pressed. "What changed you? Was it guilt, PR considerations, a genuine—" "My daughter," Alexander interrupted, his voice low but fierce. "My daughter changed me. Now leave us alone." He guided Emma away, acutely aware of her thoughtful expression. She was too perceptive to miss the significance of the encounter. "Were you really called the Terminator?" she asked as they examined a deep-sea display. Alexander sighed. "Yes. It wasn't a compliment." "Because you fired people?" Because I didn't care about consequences as long as I got what I wanted. The admission felt both painful and cleansing. Emma considered this with her characteristic seriousness. But you care now. It wasn't a question, but Alexander answered anyway. I'm learning to. That evening, as Alexander tucked Emma into her newly decorated bedroom, she asked unexpectedly, "Do you miss it? Being important?" The question caught him off guard. "I was never really important, Emma. I just thought I was." She looked unconvinced. "People still call all the time. Mrs. Reynolds says the phone rings constantly." Alexander smoothed her blanket. "Those people want something from me. Money, connections, power. You're the only person who just wants me." It was perhaps the most honest statement he'd made in decades. "Happy birthday, Emma, Mrs." Reynolds presented a beautifully decorated cake at the center of the dining table. Emma stared wide-eyed at the ocean-themed creation, complete with fondant sea creatures and 8 carefully placed candles. 7 for her years, 1 for good luck. 3 months into her new life, Emma still approached celebrations with cautious disbelief. "This is all for me?" she whispered. "Of course," Alexander replied, fighting unexpected emotion. "Make a wish." This birthday, her first without Katerina, her first with a father who'd been a stranger months ago, represented more than just turning 8. It marked the approach of their final custody hearing, where Judge Martinez would decide Emma's permanent placement. Emma closed her eyes tightly, then blew out the candles. "What did you wish for?" Mrs. Reynolds asked. "She can't tell, or it won't come true," Alexander said, remembering this rule from his own distant childhood. Emma looked up at him, suddenly serious. "I wished we could stay together." The simple statement pierced Alexander's carefully maintained composure. After all this time, she still feared being sent away. Despite his efforts, Emma's security remained fragile, a painful reminder of the damage his absence had caused. "That's already coming true," he promised, hoping the court would agree. Now, presents. Emma opened each gift with deliberate care. Books about marine biology, art supplies, a telescope for stargazing. The final package contained a small velvet box. "This belonged to my mother," Alexander explained, as Emma revealed a delicate silver locket. "Your grandmother. It's beautiful," Emma whispered, examining the intricate engravings. "Open it." Inside was a tiny photograph of Katerina, smiling in the summer sun. On the opposite side, Alexander had placed a picture of himself. "So you'll always have both of us with you," he explained, his voice rough with emotion. Emma launched herself into his arms, a rare, unrestrained display of affection that left him momentarily stunned before he returned the embrace. Later that evening, after Emma had fallen asleep surrounded by her new treasures, Alexander received a call from Rebecca. The social worker submitted her final report, his lawyer informed him. "It's mixed." Alexander tensed. "Explain." "She acknowledges significant improvement in your parenting and Emma's adjustment. However, she expresses concern about what happens when you return to work full-time." The question had haunted Alexander as well. His leave of absence would end soon. The board was pressuring him to resume his former schedule: international travel, 16-hour days, constant availability. "The judge will want assurances that this isn't a temporary adjustment," Rebecca continued. "Your history works against you, Alexander. The narrative of a workaholic who reverts to type is compelling." After hanging up, Alexander poured himself a rare scotch and stepped onto the terrace. Below, Manhattan glittered, a city he'd once dominated with single-minded ambition. For decades, his identity had been inseparable from his business empire. Now that empire seemed increasingly irrelevant compared to a small girl's trust. His phone rang again, Thomas with yet another emergency requiring the CEO's attention. Alexander declined the call, instead opening his email to draft the message he'd been considering for weeks. The following morning, Emma found him in the kitchen, making her favorite blueberry pancakes, another skill he'd painstakingly acquired. "Is something wrong?" she asked, noticing his distraction. Alexander flipped a pancake with moderate success. "I made an important decision last night." Emma climbed onto her usual stool, expression guarded. "About me." "About us," he corrected gently. "I've decided not to return to my previous position at Wagner Enterprises." Her forehead creased. "You're quitting your job?" "Not exactly." He served the slightly misshapen pancakes. "I'm becoming chairman instead of CEO. Thomas will handle daily operations, international travel, and most meetings. I'll focus on strategy and major decisions, all from here in New York. Because of me." The question contained a note of worry. "Because of us," Alexander repeated firmly, "and because I've discovered something surprising. I don't miss my old life. Not the travel, the endless meetings, the competitive battles, none of it." "But your company is important," Emma insisted, echoing the values Katerina had clearly instilled. "Some things are more important." Alexander sat beside her. "Like being here when you get home from school, like knowing what you're learning and who your friends are, like being your father." Emma studied him with those penetrating blue eyes. "Mama said you were the smartest person she ever met. She said you could do anything if you decided it mattered enough." The comment left Alexander momentarily speechless. Despite everything, Katerina had spoken well of him to their daughter. The generosity of that act humbled him completely. "Your mother," he said finally, "was the truly smart one." The boardroom at Wagner Enterprises felt oddly unfamiliar to Alexander as he presented his restructuring plan. Faces that had once anticipated his every word now regarded him with barely concealed skepticism. "Let me be clear," he concluded. "This isn't a temporary arrangement. Thomas assumes CEO responsibilities permanently. I'll remain as executive chairman, focusing on strategic direction while working primarily from New York." The CFO cleared his throat. "Alexander, with all due respect, this company has succeeded because of your hands-on leadership. Your personal involvement in negotiations, your direct oversight, and those qualities will continue through Thomas and the executive team," Alexander interrupted smoothly. "My priorities have changed. The company must adapt." "Because of a child you met 4 months ago?" someone muttered, not quite under their breath. Alexander fixed the speaker with an icy stare, a glimpse of his former self. "Because I finally understand what success actually means, Robert. It isn't measured in acquisitions or profit margins." The meeting adjourned with silent tension. As executives filed out, Thomas lingered. "They'll come around," he assured Alexander. "Change is always difficult." Alexander nodded, gathering his materials. "The Tokyo deal?" "Proceeding as planned. The expansion timeline—" Thomas stopped mid-sentence, staring past Alexander toward the doorway. Alexander turned to find Emma standing uncertainly at the entrance, accompanied by Mrs. Reynolds, who looked apologetic. "I'm sorry to interrupt, sir. School called. Emma wasn't feeling well." Alexander was across the room immediately, concern replacing all business thoughts. "What's wrong?" "My stomach hurts," Emma admitted quietly. "The nurse called Mrs. Reynolds." "She has a slight fever," Mrs. Reynolds added. "I thought you'd want to know right away, given the circumstances." "The circumstances, the custody hearing scheduled for tomorrow. Any parenting missteps now could be catastrophic." "Cancel my remaining meetings," Alexander told Thomas, already guiding Emma toward the elevator. "We're going home." "I'm sorry," Emma whispered as they descended to the lobby. "I know you were busy." "Never too busy for this," Alexander assured her, the truth of it resonating deeply. By evening, Emma's temperature had risen to 101, her small body burning with fever as she curled miserably on the sofa. Alexander called the pediatrician, followed instructions meticulously, and kept constant vigil. Every whimper and restless movement amplified his helplessness. "Should we go to the hospital?" he asked Mrs. Reynolds anxiously, after Emma finally fell into fitful sleep. "Children get fevers, Mr. Wagner," she reassured him. "The doctor said to monitor overnight. You should rest too. The hearing is tomorrow." "I'm not leaving her," Alexander replied, settling into an armchair beside the sofa. Throughout the night, he checked her temperature, offered water, and adjusted cool cloths on her forehead. Each time Emma woke disoriented, she found him there, a constant presence unlike anything in his previous life. By morning, her fever had broken, but she remained weak and pale. Alexander called the court to request a postponement of the hearing. "I understand your concern, Mr. Wagner," the clerk replied, "but Judge Martinez has a full docket for weeks. Rescheduling would delay permanent custody significantly." Alexander faced an impossible choice: attend the hearing that would determine Emma's future or remain with his sick child when she needed him. "What does your lawyer advise?" Mrs. Reynolds asked gently. "To attend the hearing at all costs." Alexander watched Emma sleeping. "Rebecca says my absence would demonstrate exactly what the social worker fears, that I'll prioritize Emma only when convenient." "I could stay with her," Mrs. Reynolds offered. "She'll be perfectly cared for." It was the logical solution, one the old Alexander would have taken without hesitation. Delegate the caretaking, handle the business. But the memory of Emma's words haunted him. Important men don't have time for little girls. When Judge Martinez entered the courtroom at 2 p.m., her eyes swept the gallery, lingering on the conspicuously empty chair beside Alexander's lawyer. "Where is Mr. Wagner?" she asked sharply. Rebecca rose. "Your Honor, Mr. Wagner sends his deepest apologies. His daughter developed a high fever overnight. He's at home caring for her." The judge's expression hardened. "This hearing has been scheduled for weeks, Counselor. Many parents manage childcare during important obligations." "Yes, Your Honor," Rebecca agreed. "Mr. Wagner understands the significance of today's proceedings. However, when faced with the choice between attending this hearing and tending to his daughter's immediate needs, he chose Emma." Judge Martinez paused, considering this. "Is he available by phone?" "Yes, Your Honor." To everyone's surprise, the judge directed her clerk to place the call. When Alexander answered, the courtroom could hear Emma's congested breathing in the background. "Mr. Wagner," Judge Martinez began, "you understand the purpose of today's hearing?" "Yes, Your Honor," Alexander replied, "to determine if I'm fit to be Emma's permanent guardian, and yet you chose not to attend." Alexander's response was immediate. "Emma needed me more than the court did. I believe that's what being a parent means. Being there when your child is vulnerable, regardless of other consequences." A long silence followed. Finally, Judge Martinez spoke. "Mr. Wagner, the social worker's report questions whether your devotion to your daughter will survive the demands of your career. Your absence today, while inconvenient to this court, provides a rather compelling answer." She shuffled some papers. "I'm prepared to rule now. Permanent custody of Emma Schmidt is granted to Alexander Wagner, with quarterly check-ins for the first year." Alexander's thanks was interrupted by Emma's small voice in the background. "Is it over, Dad? Can you read me another chapter now?" It was the first time she had called him Dad. "You're doing it wrong," Emma insisted, watching Alexander struggle with her hair. "The braid goes over, not under." "Rocket science is simpler than this," Alexander muttered, attempting to coordinate his fingers into the intricate pattern Emma had demonstrated 3 times already. 6 months into fatherhood, he'd mastered school lunches, laundry sorting, and even basic cooking, but hairstyling remained an unconquered frontier. "Mom used to do it perfectly," Emma sighed. The casual reference to Katerina no longer accompanied by the heavy silence that had marked earlier months. "I'm sure she did," Alexander agreed, securing the lopsided result with a hairband. "How's that?" Emma examined herself in the mirror critically. "It's creative," Alexander laughed. "Diplomatic as always. Ready for your presentation?" Emma nodded, gathering her marine biology project. Today, her class was presenting research on ocean conservation, a topic that had consumed her attention for weeks. Alexander had rearranged board meetings to attend. "Nervous?" he asked as they rode the elevator down. "A little," she admitted. "What if I forget something important?" "Then you'll improvise," Alexander replied with the confidence of someone who delivered countless presentations to intimidating audiences. "You know this subject better than anyone in your class." Emma clutched her folder tightly. "Promise you'll stay the whole time, even if Thomas calls with an emergency." The question revealed lingering insecurities, despite months of stability. "Wild horses couldn't drag me away," Alexander promised. At Westbrook Academy, Alexander settled into an uncomfortably small chair among other parents. He'd become a familiar presence, attending conferences, chaperoning field trips, even coaching Emma's debate team despite his complete lack of teaching experience. When Emma's turn came, her initial nervousness melted away as she explained ocean acidification with passion and precision far beyond her 8 years. Alexander watched with undisguised pride, remembering the quiet, wary child who had appeared at his restaurant doorstep. His phone vibrated. Thomas with the quarterly financials. For the first time in his career, Alexander switched off his phone during a business communication without a second thought. After the presentations, Emma's teacher approached them. "Mr. Wagner, could I speak with you privately?" Alexander tensed. Throughout his life, such requests usually preceded problems. "It's nothing concerning," Mrs. Patterson clarified, noting his expression. "Quite the opposite. We're selecting students for next year's accelerated program, and Emma's performance has been exceptional." Relief washed over him. "That's wonderful." "The program includes a 2-week marine biology camp in Florida this summer," she continued. "Given Emma's passion, she'd be a perfect candidate." Emma's eyes widened with excitement. "Real ocean research?" "With professional marine biologists," Mrs. Patterson confirmed. "Students stay in university dormitories while conducting fieldwork." Alexander processed this information. 2 weeks away from home? "Parents often visit midway," Mrs. Patterson added. "Many families make a vacation of it." Emma looked up at Alexander, clearly conflicted between her scientific enthusiasm and apprehension about their first separation since reuniting. "We should discuss it at home," Alexander suggested, recognizing her uncertainty. That evening, as they shared dinner on the terrace overlooking Central Park, Emma broached the subject. "I don't have to go to the marine camp." "Why not?" Alexander asked carefully. "It sounds perfect for you." Emma pushed food around her plate. "It's a long time to be away." Alexander understood her unspoken fear. That distance might sever their still new connection, that he might revert to his former self in her absence. "Emma," he began gently, "do you remember what the judge said at our final hearing?" She nodded. "That we're a permanent family now." "Exactly. Permanent means forever, regardless of distance or time apart." He reached for her hand. "If you want this opportunity, you should take it. I'll miss you terribly, but I'll be right here when you return." "Promise?" "I promise." Alexander squeezed her small fingers. "Besides, I'll come visit midway. Maybe we could explore the Florida Keys afterward." Emma's expression brightened. "Could we see manatees? I've read all about their conservation status." "We'll see every manatee in Florida, if that's what you want." As summer approached, Alexander faced his own challenge, his first business trip since Emma's arrival. The Tokyo expansion required his presence for 3 critical days of negotiations that couldn't be delegated. "It's only 3 nights," he explained as they sat in Emma's bedroom, surrounded by the marine camp packing list they were organizing. "Mrs. Reynolds will stay here, and I'll call morning and evening." Emma nodded with forced casualness. "It's okay. I understand. But that night, Alexander found her sitting alone on the terrace, staring at the stars with uncharacteristic melancholy. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, joining her. "I was thinking about Mom," Emma admitted quietly. "She always said goodbye when she left for work, even for a few hours. She said goodbyes were important because you never know." She trailed off, but Alexander understood the unspoken end. You never know if you'll see someone again. Katerina had lived with that uncertainty, raising their child alone while battling cancer. "Your mother was very wise," Alexander said softly. "I've learned more from her through you than I ever appreciated when I knew her." Emma leaned against his shoulder, a gesture of trust that still amazed him. "I think she would be happy now," she said softly. "She always wanted me to know you." The simple statement carried the weight of forgiveness, not just Emma's, but perhaps Katerina's as well. Alexander wrapped his arm around his daughter, acknowledging the extraordinary gift he'd been given. A second chance he hadn't deserved, but would spend his life honoring. The Florida sun cast golden light across the university marine laboratory as Alexander watched Emma carefully measure water samples alongside her research group. Summer had transformed her, tanned, confident, brimming with scientific terminology and newfound independence. "Dad, come see this," as she called, waving him toward her microscope with an excitement that made his heart swell. The word "Dad" still carried a touch of magic, even after hearing it daily for months. Alexander peered through the lens at what appeared to be an unremarkable speck. "What am I looking at?" "Phytoplankton," Emma explained with the enthusiasm normally reserved for rock stars or movie premieres. "They produce half the world's oxygen, more important than the entire Amazon rainforest." "Impressive for something so small," Alexander observed, earning an approving nod from the marine biologist supervising the students. "She has remarkable insight," the scientist told Alexander quietly. "I've rarely seen someone her age grasp ecological relationships so intuitively." Pride surged through him, not the possessive pride of achievement by association he'd once valued, but something deeper and more selfless. Emma's intelligence and compassion existed independently of him. His only role now was to nurture what was already there. As the day's activities concluded, Alexander and Emma walked along the beach, collecting shells and discussing their planned exploration of the Keys over the next week. "I've been thinking," Emma said suddenly, bending to examine a sand dollar, "about my name." Alexander waited, sensing importance in her tone. "I'd like to be Emma Wagner now," she continued, not meeting his eyes. "Not Emma Schmidt, if that's okay." The request blindsided him completely. "Emma, that would. I would be honored. But your mother—" "Mom would understand," Emma interrupted with certainty. "She always said names should reflect who you belong with." She finally looked up at him. "And I belong with you now." Alexander knelt in the sand, meeting her gaze directly. "Emma, nothing would make me prouder, but you should know I've been considering something too." He took a deep breath. "I'd like to establish the Katerina Schmidt Foundation for single parents, a way to honor your mother by helping others in her situation, providing housing, medical care, educational support." Emma's eyes widened. "Really? Your mother raised an extraordinary daughter with no help from me," Alexander continued. "That kind of strength and dedication deserves recognition. The foundation would ensure no parent has to choose between medical treatment and housing their child." Emma launched herself into his arms with rare abandon. "She would have loved that," she whispered against his shoulder. "She always wanted to help people." That evening, as they shared dinner on their hotel balcony overlooking the ocean, Alexander received a call from Thomas. The Tokyo deal had closed successfully. Once, such news would have been cause for celebration, another victory in his relentless pursuit of expansion. Now it registered as merely pleasant information. far less significant than Emma's animated description of tomorrow's manatee excursion. "Is everything okay at work?" Emma asked, noting his brief distraction. "Everything's fine," Alexander assured her. "Just business." "You don't talk about it much anymore," she observed with her characteristic perceptiveness. Alexander considered this. "It doesn't seem as important as it once did." "But you built everything yourself," Emma persisted. "From nothing. Mom said you came to America with almost no money and created an empire through pure determination." Alexander was startled by this perspective. Katerina sharing his origin story with their daughter, presenting his ambition as admirable rather than destructive. "That's partly true," he acknowledged. "I was driven to succeed, to prove my worth through achievements and acquisitions. But somewhere along the way, I confused wealth with value." Emma tilted her head thoughtfully. "And now?" "Now I understand that real value has nothing to do with balance sheets or stock prices." He reached across the table for her hand. "Real value is in connections, in caring about someone more than yourself." As twilight deepened into night, they watched stars emerge above the ocean, the same stars visible from their Manhattan terrace, yet somehow different here. Emma identified constellations she'd studied through her telescope, her knowledge extending far beyond Alexander's. "Mom and I used to watch stars sometimes," Emma said softly. "On clear nights, we'd sit outside our apartment, and she'd tell me that even when people are far apart, they're still under the same sky." Alexander felt a surge of gratitude toward Katerina for her wisdom, her strength, and most of all, for the extraordinary child beside him. "Dad?" Emma asked, her voice hesitant. "Do you think it's possible to love two different homes, New York and the ocean?" Alexander recognized the deeper question. Was it possible to honor both her past with Katerina and her future with him, to love her mother's memory while building a new life? "I think hearts are remarkably expandable," he replied carefully. "They can hold many loves simultaneously without diminishing any of them." Emma nodded, satisfaction in her expression. "That's what I thought too." As they prepared to return to Manhattan the following week, Alexander reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past year. He'd been transformed from a ruthless businessman who measured worth in billions to a father who found infinite value in a child's trust. His empire had contracted, while his world expanded immeasurably. On their final evening in Florida, as they walked along the shore at sunset, Emma collected one perfect shell for each month they'd been together, 11 in total, arranged carefully in a small velvet pouch. "For your office," she explained, presenting them to Alexander, "so you'll always remember." "I could never forget," he promised, accepting the gift with the reverence it deserved. Emma studied him with those perceptive blue eyes, Katerina's eyes, that seemed to see straight through pretense to essential truth. "Are you happy, Dad, with how everything changed?" The question deserved honest reflection. Alexander thought about his former life, the power, the prestige, the endless acquisition, and compared it to bedtime stories, science projects, and the simple joy of witnessing Emma's growth. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," he answered truthfully. As they turned to head back, Emma slipped her hand into his, a gesture of complete trust that still humbled him daily. Behind them, their footprints traced parallel paths along the shore, separate but perfectly aligned, before disappearing together beneath the incoming tide.